In today's gospel, what we have is Jesus giving us a prescription of how to resolve conflicts that are they're going to be inevitable in our life. And so, what happens is Jesus gives us a prescription. Now, one of the things about it is that sometimes people will say, and you hear people say, "Well, this had to have been a later inclusion, that they somehow had been put words back into Jesus's mouth." From a later inclusion of the church, because after all, there wasn't really a church at this time. So how could he have said, go to the church? If you have a problem, go to your brother, then take another witness, then go to the church, take the church with you. If he doesn't take care, if he doesn't believe that, then treat him as a Gentile or a tax collector. And then whatever two or three are gathered in my name agree, there am I present in their midst. And so one of the things about it is that fails to take into account, even from the beginnings, the idea that the church was there in helping to give people conflict resolution. We think about back into the time of Moses, and Moses was there in the tent. His father-in-law Jethro came and saw the people waiting outside the tent, and they were down the street, out the door, around the hall, out the door, all this kind of stuff, this huge line. And he was saying, "What in the world's going on? You're there from day until night. What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, they come to me with their conflicts and their problems, and I'm trying to resolve their situation." He said, "No, that's not right. What you need to do is to appoint people to help you, because you're going to wear out." And Moses saw the wisdom in his father-in-law Jethro's talk, and so he did just that. The other one is that we think about is in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. In 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul runs into the situation in Corinth. Now, the people in Corinth are very they have their divisions, they're very divisive, they have all kinds of problems within the church, and they're taking those situations to court. And so what Paul does is that he says, that basically that's not a good thing, that when one has a grievance against his brother, does he dare go to the law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? So that idea that somehow the pagan courts are the better arbiter of decisions than the church. So even in the early church, there was that idea of coming to the church for conflict resolution. And then he basically I wonder how how it would be today, with all the lawsuits that we have in the United States. What would Paul be thinking today? But he's basically saying that you're going to judge the nations. You're going to be sitting on the judgment seats. And so how are you, if you can't even judge among yourselves and you have to go to the pagan courts to make their decision, what's that going to mean for you? So again, what we think about in the gospel is that he says the best way to do it is to take a neutral person who is respected within the community, bring that person to the situation. If they refuse to accept any decisions, then to bring the church, and if they refuse to accept the church, then treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector. So what does that mean, to treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector? I think one of the things about it is that with someone who's a friend, you really don't have to really worry about borders, and you don't really have to worry about making sure of keeping borders and keeping a tight rein. Whereas you would if somebody was somebody who is a Gentile or a tax collector. So what it does is that there's certainly that idea of forgiveness. There's certainly the idea of praying for them, but to think that that you don't have to set up borders, you can just let yourself be a doormat, that you can let yourself be sinned against willfully time after time, and it really doesn't matter, is not really correct thinking. That really what we think about it is that there can be, if a person is, for example, stolen from you in your business, that there certainly can be bringing the person to trial. There certainly can be, the person, once they're punished, that you don't have to invite them back in as an accountant once they've stolen the money from you. That there can be certain boundaries set up, and that as the person shows that they're more trustworthy, that maybe certain boundaries can be taken away, certain boundaries can be loosened, but the fact is that you want to have certain boundaries in those situations. That if someone has sinned against you, and not just a simple disagreement, but there is actual sin, that you want to have those boundaries, that you care for them, you certainly pray for them, you don't trash them on social media, you don't call up friends and say, do you know what so-and-so did? But again, just keeping those boundaries set. And then, so he said, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in the midst of them. So again, that idea of prayer, that idea of prayerful consideration, that idea of wisdom that's given in those situations to help the person. So where 2 or 3 are gathered, there Jesus is in their midst. Thanks, and God bless.